Hi, this is Chris Perrin with LearnWebLogicOnline.com, and thank you for checking out my Oracle WebLogic for Administrators course on Udemy. I'm calling this the full course because I have a free course on Udemy that goes over the WebLogic product at a very high level and walks through a very basic installation. This course is designed to walk through several different topics in pretty good depth and also includes several different lab exercises. So my full course on WebLogic is going to walk through a ton of different topics as they relate to WebLogic administration. We're going to discuss managed servers, the admin server, machines, high availability, clusters, security providers, how to deploy applications, Java messaging service or JMS, remote deployment for scaling out your environment, and several other topics. So this is going to be a very exciting course. It will get your feet wet, more than wet. You'll be up to your waist, hopefully, in WebLogic by the time you're done with this course. This course is mainly designed for administrators, but honestly, developers can take this course too. They will learn a lot. Even architects. I don't have that on here, but I'm an architect at heart, and this is a very helpful course to help architects understand the technology aspect of WebLogic. But primarily, this course is geared towards administrators. You will learn how to install, deploy, maintain WebLogic. So there aren't really any prerequisites for this course. However, this course is not going to cover the WebLogic product, specifically its feature sets, what it is, what it can do, and where it fits within Oracle Fusion Middleware. I cover those topics in my free course called Beginning Oracle WebLogic for Administrators. So go check that out. It will give you an overview of some WebLogic concepts such as what's a domain, what's an admin server. It's a quick and dirty course to get you up to speed really quick on terminology. So for this course, you're going to need a computer, obviously, one capable of running WebLogic, multiple instances of WebLogic actually. We're going to install WebLogic, create a domain, and by the end of this course, you're going to have several WebLogic servers running on your computer. So at a minimum, I would say memory is more important than CPU. I would say at least 4 gigs, preferably 6 to 8 of RAM, and 3 gigabytes of storage space. You're also going to need a Java Development Kit. For this course, we are using the latest JDK 7. And you're going to need the WebLogic 12c installer, specifically the generic installer. The lab guide that accompanies this course will contain references to downloading JDK 7 and WebLogic 12c. Again, thank you very much for purchasing this course. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So I wanted to spend some time talking about the materials that are attached to this course, specifically the lab guide. Throughout this course, each lecture in this course, with the exception of the introduction, has a lab associated with it. And all the labs, and I believe there's about 13 or 14 in total, are part of a single lab guide. So the lab guide should be attached to the introductory course. Since I couldn't find a way to attach it to the course in general, it's tied to the introductory lesson. So here's the cover page for the lab guide, nothing fancy here. And it's in PDF, so please download this prior to completing any of the labs. And the lab videos that I record pretty much follow the lab guide that you see here. So I don't try to deviate a whole lot from the lab guide, but I do provide a lot more background in the video that accompanies the lab guide. So if you're just looking to execute the labs, just using the lab guide and not following along in the videos, you can certainly do that, but you'll learn a lot more, I think, if you do watch the videos. Anyway, you can see here we have 13 different labs, from installing WebLogic all the way down to WebLogic scripting tool. So just to provide a quick overview so you can get an idea as to how this lab guide is put together. Each lab is organized into 4 different sections. There's a skills learned section which highlights what you're going to learn in that lab. And the overview provides kind of a detailed background for the lab. what you're actually going to do. And then the configuration parameters usually is a set of tables that define configuration parameters for, say, creating a WebLogic server or a JDBC resource or a JMS server. Rather than embed those configuration items or details in the lab text itself, I kind of break that out into a separate table, and you'll see that referenced throughout the lab. So, conventions. This is really why I put this little lecture together on the lab guide. For the purposes of this lab, we're going to refer to Unix-style file paths, or file names, or environment settings. If there's a significant deviation with respect to Windows, then I will call that out in this lab guide. For the most part, when you install WebLogic in Windows, all the shell versions, versions of WebLogic scripts do exist in Windows versions. So instead of being .sh files, they'll be .cmd or .bat files. So the syntax will be the same. The parameters will be the same. The scripts will be the same for the most part. However, just the Windows file naming conventions and directory conventions will be different, obviously. So just to keep the lab guide simple and uncluttered, we stuck with Unix style. Another area that I want to focus on are these lab directories. So to ensure some consistency and to reduce the amount of variability for all of you out there and for me, I came up with a standardized directory structure that I refer to throughout the lab. And it starts with lab home. So everything in this lab, it hangs off of this lab home directory reference. Some of you may be looking at these and thinking, oh, these are environment variables. They are not. You can certainly create them if you'd like, save you some time from typing them on the command line, but these are not environment variables that you have to create. These are just references, shortcuts that I use throughout the lab guide. And so, like I said, everything hangs off of lab home. And in Unix, on my system, I created it off of U01 Udemy. And so everything from WebLogic install to domains to applications gets put underneath lab home. So it doesn't matter what your lab home is. You can set it up to be whatever you want. However, everything underneath lab home should be relatively consistent. And so what I mean by that, Oracle root, Oracle home, domain root, domain home, application, Derby home, all these references here hang off of lab home. You can define lab home to be whatever you want to be, but try to be consistent with the rest of the directory references, because I do use these throughout the rest of the lab guide. So you won't see a fully qualified path when we're either executing a command or trying to locate a file in the lab guide. We'll use the shortcut. However, when you're executing commands, especially with WebLogic, always use a fully qualified path. Don't use relative paths. Okay, hardware requirements. I may have covered this in the introductory course, and if I didn't, we're going to be starting up, worst case scenario, we're going to be starting up 2 or 3, maybe even 4 WebLogic servers. And so I would recommend, you could get away with half a gig of RAM per WebLogic server, a gig of RAM, no more than a gig of RAM per server. So I'd say for this lab, you need between 4 and 6 gigs of RAM. And for disk space, I'd say 3 gigabytes, maybe 4 gigabytes is safe, 2 gigabytes at a minimum. And for software required, well, so the lab guide has instructions on downloading the 12C generic installer, which can be used on any platform. It uses Java to install the product. And then JDK 1.7, there's a link in the references section, which I'll talk about in a second, to download and install that. So this lab guide does not include instructions on installing Java. And by the way, we can't use OpenJDK. We want to use the Oracle JDK. So if you've got a Linux environment, specifically if it's like Ubuntu or CentOS or whatever your favorite distribution is, most likely it's OpenJDK, and that's to do with licensing issues with Oracle JDK. So Oracle JDK is free and it's open source. You can go download it from oracle.com, and there's a link in this guide to do that. But OpenJDK is not supported. And the last bit of software you need, and this should be obvious, but you need a text editor. You're going to need one. If you're in it doesn't matter what type of text editor or which text editor, you just need to have access to one. In the lab guide, I make heavy use of VI because I'm usually SSH'd into a server, so it's easier and quicker for me just to use VI in some cases. But any editor will work. Okay, and if you need help, either respond to me via this course or go to my website, learnweblogiconline.com, and send me a message, please. I'll be more than happy to assist you or answer any questions that you have that weren't answered in the lab or in any of the lectures. Okay, so here's an example. I'm not going to go through each and every lab guide, but this is how it's laid out. So lab number 1 covers installing WebLogic. And you can see here we've got the duration and the skills that you're going to learn, hopefully, and an overview of the lab, which sometimes regurgitates what skills are being learned. And then under configuration parameters, you can see here that we've got those tables I was talking about that define for performing configuration within the lab. So you can see here we have the lab home directory. We've got generic installers. So when we run the generic installer, it's going to ask us for these values, and I'm specifying these here. So you can see, for instance, under table 3, for the inventory directory parameter, I have lab home / or inventory. When you're installing WebLogic, do not enter the literal value lab_home. Please be sure to substitute the real fully qualified path for lab home. Okay, so, and then it proceeds with the instructions, which is simply a table broken out by sections. So in this case, section 1 is preparing your environment. Section 2 is installing JDK7, and there's a link to do that. And then the third section is installing WebLogic 12c using the generic installer. So these are how the labs are laid out. Now I want to jump down, and this is a pretty long document. There's about 70 plus pages here. And so each one of these lab guides is associated with a lecture. So the very last page is a references section. And in the references section, I provided some very handy and required links for this lab guide. And so if you're going to download Oracle WebLogic, you need to create an Oracle account. And it's free. So you can go to this website here and go ahead and create an Oracle account. And same with JDK7 as well. So here's the links to download JDK7, and then the install guide for JDK7, and there's one per platform type. And then the 12c downloads page, and then the online documentation, which is an excellent resource. So here, it's bookmarked here. I've also got the Derby admin guide listed here. If you want to know more about Derby, Derby is the database that comes in with WebLogic. It's merely for development or just really for sandbox. I would not use it in a production environment. You've got an enterprise class application server. You're going to want to use an enterprise class database on the back end. So don't use Derby database. But it is a database, and we do use it in this lab guide when we configure a data source. And then there's additional reference links for the MV reference and WLST and the proxy. So we'll dive into more detail on these topics later on. And so that's pretty much it for the lab guide. I hope that kind of gives you an idea as to how this lab guide is organized and what to expect. So let's start with the next lecture, our first lecture on WebLogic, installing WebLogic. Hi everyone, in this lecture we're going to discuss installing WebLogic. In my free course on learning WebLogic 12c Essentials, we walked through using graphical installer, also known as the Oracle Universal Installer. In 12c, WebLogic migrated from its legacy configuration wizard, or install wizard, to using OUI, Oracle Universal Installer. So we will revisit that in the lab exercise that accompanies this lecture. You'll walk through installing WebLogic using the traditional method. There's also another method, which is the silent method. You could install WebLogic silently using a response file. And a response file is simply a property file that defines properties for installing WebLogic. And that we will generate using OUI. And that's really it. So let's go ahead and switch over to the lab guide and work on lab exercise number 1, installing WebLogic. Hi everyone, welcome to lab number 1, installing WebLogic. In this lab, you're going to learn how to install WebLogic using the 2 methods that we went over in the lecture. One is using Oracle Universal Installer to install WebLogic graphically, and the other method is to do a silent install, or an unintended install. And you will also uninstall WebLogic as well using the same method. So I'm going to walk through this lab with you right now. I am not going to cover the installation of Java. I'll leave that as an exercise for you to perform. There are links in the lab guide to the install procedures for installing Java. So it is assumed that JDK is already installed. I'm also assuming that you've gone ahead and downloaded the Weblogic 12.1.3 generic installer as described in the lab guide. So what I've done for this course, and you're going to see this throughout the rest of the lab exercises, is that I've created a directory structure for all these labs. So in my environment, and I referenced this in the lab guide, I have this root directory called lab home. It's u01/u. And if you look in the lab guide, you will see that there is a directory references table. The directory reference table lists several different directories that we will refer to throughout the course of all these labs. So rather than me saying go to c:/udemy or going to u01/udemy, I'll just say go to lab home. So start off by creating the directory structures outlined in the lab exercise. You can see in here that I have nothing except for the Oracle Fusion Middleware generic installer. So go ahead and copy that file into this directory from where you downloaded it from. Let's go ahead and make the other directories that are required for this lab exercise. Make a domains directory for holding our domains. We'll make an applications directory for holding our applications. It's very simple. Okay, now that we've done that, we're ready to fire up the generic installer for Weblogic. So go ahead and execute the generic installer by issuing the following Java command. So just make sure Java is used, so that when you type Java, something actually happens. So to run the generic installer, we're going to type java-jar and then generic installer. It will take time for Java to extract all the necessary install files and launch the installations. Take this window out of the way. So the first window that pops up is the Oracle Inventory Setup window. The Oracle Inventory is used to maintain an inventory of all the Oracle products that you have installed on your system. There are two types of inventory. There's central inventory and there's local inventory. The central inventory is used to maintain inventory on an entire host or server. And that typically requires root permissions to set up, and there's some post-installation steps that you have to do, as you can see in the window down below. You've got to generate a run the create central inventory shell script. It's not complicated, but for the purposes of this lab, for simplicity's sake, we're going to just use the local inventory. So this defaults to the home directory on my computer. I'm going to change this just so that it points to the lab home that we're working with in this course. And then you can leave the operating system group as the default value. So my default OS group is staff. It's going to be different for you most likely, so just leave it as the default and hit OK. So once the inventory is actually created, the Oracle Universal Installer launches. So on the welcome screen, just go ahead and click Next. And then for Oracle Home represents the home directory for Weblogic, where the product is actually installed. So according to the lab guide, we have this pointed to lab home. So I'm going to replace my home directory, which is the default, to u01/udemy. Your system is going to be something else. So once you've specified Oracle Home, go ahead and click Next. And then check the radio button for complete with examples. What this is going to do, you can see here, is that's going to install all these software components with all the example code. We're going to leverage all the examples that Weblogic comes with throughout the rest of these lab exercises. Go ahead and click Next. So the installation summary screen is simply just that. It summarizes all the software that's going to be installed, where it's going to be installed, how much disk space is required, And you'll notice down here there's a button called Save Response File. The response file is used to perform silent installs in the future. So let's go ahead and save the response file. I'm going to place this in my U01 UV directory or lab home for future reference. Let's call it Weblogic install RSP for response and save. Once you've done that, go ahead and click install, and OUI is going to install Weblogic. So once the installation is complete, go ahead and click next. And then on the installation complete page, notice down here for next steps it says automatically launch the Quick Start Configuration Wizard. Make sure that box is checked and click Finish. The Quick Start Wizard is another installation program that will allow us to install and configure the sample domains that come with Weblogic. This is a really convenient utility, so you don't have to do this by hand after the install. The administrative account for all the sample domains is essentially the domain admin user. So specify Weblogic as the username, and the password, the default password that I'm using for every account throughout all the lab exercises is Weblogic123, and that is in the lab guide. Recall that we created a domains directory under lab home, so go ahead and change the default location is this user project subdirectory under local home. Let's get rid of that. What we want for the domain parent location is u01/unity or lab home /domains. And do the same for the application parent location as well. So the domain parent location is going to contain all of our domains that we're going to be working with. The application parent location is going to contain all the applications that we're going to deploy. So keep the defaults for the server listen port and the SSL listen port, 7001, 7002. And go ahead and click Create. This part will definitely take some time depending on your system. Once the 3 domains are created, go ahead and click Next. And then on this configuration details page, you'll see details about each domain that was created. We have 3 domains: WL_server, medrec, and medrec spring. So the WL server domain contains several different types of example applications. They're intended to help developers understand how to design, develop, and deploy applications for Weblogic. The medrec application is an example of a fully baked Java EE application. And medrec Spring is the Spring version of that application. Also notice the URLs. These are the URLs that you're going to use or can use to access the admin server console for each of those domains. Go ahead and click Finish. And that's it, you're done. You just installed Weblogic using OUI. Now let's move on to installing Weblogic silently using the response file. Alright, so let's begin with the silent install for Weblogic. In the previous SitLab section, we created a response file when we ran through OUI the first time. So what I want to do is I want to edit the response file that we created. So in my lab home, I should have my Weblogic install.rsp file. Let's go ahead and open that up in a text editor. Alright, so as you can see, there are only a couple parameters in here that are of note. Oracle Home, which defines where Weblogic is actually installed, and the install type. Now, if you remember when we ran through the installation wizard the first time, we specified Oracle Home. we specified the installation type as complete with examples. So we want to do the silent install, but I don't want to overwrite what we've previously done. So for just the lab's sake, let's go ahead and modify our local home and put it someplace else. What I want to do, all I'm going to do is add in a directory to install Weblogic somewhere else. I've changed the home directory. And then under install type, I don't want to install the example code again. I already have the examples, and I've already got the example domains. So let's get rid of this and add in Weblogic server. As you can see, the installation types are listed here. You can install Weblogic server, coherence, or complete with examples. So once you've made the change, go ahead and save the file and exit the editor. Now let's run the silent installer for Weblogic. And in order to do that, we have to pass in some special parameters. So the syntax is similar to what we did earlier. Launching OUI, we need java-jar, the name of the generic installer. And then we've got to pass in -silent for silent install. And then specify the fully qualified path for the response file. Then hit enter. So notice that the installer failed. We passed all the operating system checks. However, the Oracle, the silent installer is complaining about the Oracle inventory. When you run the silent installer, it is specifically looking for either a private or global Oracle inventory. Now, when we ran the GUI version of OUI earlier, we had that pop-up where we specify or inventory in our home directory. So the purposes of this lab exercise, we're going to create a private directory and then tell the silent installer to use that private directory. So we first have to create a pointer file. The pointer file tells OUI where to find the Oracle inventory. So go ahead and create that silent directory under lab home. And in the silent directory, let's create our inventory pointer file, which I'm going to simply call create private inventory.txt. And in here we need to add 2 lines. One specifying the location of the inventory, the name of this file and its location can be anything that you want, but I'm trying to follow the lab guide as I've written it. And then the group that should own the Oracle inventory. And in this case, that will be my default operating system group, which is staff. So I'll go ahead and save this file. If you don't know what group to specify, back at the terminal window, type in groups, and use the first group that is returned. So groups will return a list of all the groups in Linux or Mac OS that you are a member of. And you can use any one of these groups essentially, but use the first one. So once you've created the pointer file for the Oracle inventory, let's run the silent installer again, but this time add in another parameter for specifying the location to the pointer file. Make sure to use fully qualified paths. So that will take some time to install, and the silent installer is complete. Let's go ahead and switch directories to that silent directory and take a look at what's in here. You'll see that we have the local private Oracle inventory. Take a look at that. That the log files from the installer. And then there's also another Oracle home that was created under here. So the silent installer is great for automated installations of Weblogic. You really only need 3 things. You when you get the generic installer, you need the response file defining where Oracle Home is located and the type of install. And thirdly, you need the Oracle inventory pointer file, which tells the silent installer where to create the Oracle inventory. So now that we've installed it silently, we can also uninstall it silently. To do that, let's switch back to Lab Home. So Weblogic comes with a deinstall script that you can run silently to uninstall Weblogic. And that script is located under Oracle Home. Let's go ahead and run that script now to remove the Weblogic that we just installed. So that's going to be under Lab Home. Make sure we reference the silently installed version of Weblogic. So silent / Oracle Home, middleware, OUI, then the deinstall script. So the deinstall script takes a couple parameters, -silent, -response file, and specify the fully qualified path for the response file. And this script will remove Weblogic silently. Okay, so once Weblogic's uninstalled, go ahead and verify that it actually is uninstalled. So take a look inside the silent directory, and you'll see that there's an Oracle directory, so let's go in there and take a peek. There's nothing under Oracle middleware. So you can actually go ahead and just remove the silent directory altogether. Now, if you had other Oracle products installed, you probably want to keep the Oracle inventory around, but if you had Weblogic, only Weblogic installed, you can remove everything. And that's it. So in this lab, we've covered installing Weblogic using Oracle Universal Installer, and we've performed a silent install using the response file. Hi, this is Chris